What if I told you that 100 years ago, your great-grandparents had access to nearly 500 varieties of lettuce, 400 kinds of tomatoes, and almost 300 different sweet corns? And today, most of that is simply gone, not endangered, gone. Multiple surveys of American seed banks, comparing catalogs from 1903 to 1983, found that we lost somewhere around 93% of those crop varieties in just 80 years. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization puts the global number at roughly 75% of crop genetic diversity lost since 1900. That is not a slow drift. That is one of the fastest extinctions in the history of agriculture, and almost nobody talks about it. These weren't random plants. Many of them were bred over generations by families and small communities for flavor, for resilience, for nutrition suited to the exact soil they grew in, not for how well they'd survive a cross-country truck ride to a supermarket shelf. Today I'm going to walk you through 20 of these heirloom and heritage crops, where they came from, why they nearly vanished, and why seed savers and small farmers are working to bring them back. Stick around, because number 12 is a bean that Cherokee families carried by hand during a forced removal that killed thousands of people, and it's still grown today because of that act of preservation. And number 20 is a crop, so ordinary-looking most people would walk past in the garden, and it's disappearing anyway. If you care about food history, hit subscribe, because we cover the real, evidence-based story behind what's on your plate every week. Let's get into it. 1. Cherokee purple tomato, the heirloom that started a movement. Let's start with one of the most recognizable names in the heirloom world. Cherokee purple is a dusky, brick-red purple tomato said to have been passed down by Cherokee communities in Tennessee for more than a century before seed historian Craig LaHouille popularized it commercially in the 1990s. It's a useful place to start because its story is the story of the whole movement, a variety kept alive quietly, seed to seed, by individual families long after commercial agriculture had moved on to firmer, more uniform, longer shelf-life hybrids. Tomatoes like this one carry meaningfully more lycopene and vitamin C than the pale, early pick varieties bred, mainly for shipping durability. It's a strong reminder that doesn't travel well, and not worth growing, are two very different things. 2. Lacinato kale, the ancient leaf hiding in plain sight. If Cherokee purple is the headline act, Lacinato kale is the quiet workhorse. Also called dinosaur kale or black cabbage. It's been documented in Tuscany since at least the early 1800s, and some food historians trace related brassicas back much further into Roman agriculture. It nearly disappeared from American gardens through most of the 20th century, kept alive mainly by Italian immigrant families, before the 2000s kale boom pulled it back into the mainstream. It's simply one of the more nutrient-dense leafy greens available, rich in vitamin K, vitamin A precursors, and fiber. Chop it into soups or massage it into salads. Either way, it's a low-effort addition to a weekly routine. 3. Hopi blue corn, grown for a desert, not a warehouse. Hopi blue corn was bred by Hopi farmers in what's now northern Arizona to survive on minimal rainfall in deep, dry sand, an environment most commercial corn simply cannot handle. Its striking blue-black kernels come from anthocyanin pigments, the same class of antioxidant compounds found in blueberries and purple cabbage. Commercial agriculture standardized around a handful of yellow and white dent corns bred for uniform mechanical harvesting, and drought-adapted regional corns like this one were largely pushed out of the seed trade by the mid-1900s. It's traditionally ground into a fine blue cornmeal for flatbread known as peaky. Today it survives mostly through tribal seed-saving programs and small heirloom seed companies. 4. Boston marrow squash, the forgotten giant. If those first three ask a little more of you in the kitchen, Boston marrow squash asks for almost nothing beyond a sunny garden bed, which is exactly why it deserves a spot on this list. First documented in New England in the 1830s, this bright orange winter squash was, for a time, one of the most widely grown squashes in America, praised for its smooth, richly colored flesh. It fell out of favor as growers standardized around a few uniform butternut and acorn types that stored and shipped more predictably. Like most winter squash, it's a solid source of beta-carotene and fiber. Roast it, mash it, or use it exactly like you would butternut. For most of modern agriculture, heritage beans have been reduced to a footnote next to a handful of commercial varieties. That's a mistake, because heirloom beans are some of the most concentrated, well-preserved sources of regional plant genetics in the entire food system. 5. Jacob's cattle bean, a New England survivor, named for its distinctive maroon and white speckled pattern. This bean has been grown in New England since at least the 1700s, likely introduced through Passamaquoddy communities in Maine. It's a dense source of plant protein and fiber, and its thick skin made it a reliable keeper through long northeastern winters before refrigeration existed. It nearly vanished as canned, uniform white, and pinto beans came to dominate grocery shelves in the 20th century. 6. Trail of Tears bean, carried through forced removal. This black bean gets its name from its documented history. Cherokee families are said to have carried its seeds by hand during the forced 1838 to 39 removal from the southeastern United States to Oklahoma, a journey during which thousands of people died. That the variety survived at all is a direct result of individuals choosing to protect it under horrific conditions. Modern seed savers treat it as both a food crop and a piece of living historical memory, and heirloom seed catalogs today keep it in circulation specifically because of that history. 7. See Island red pea, a coastal Gullah Geechee crop, grown for generations along the coastal southeast by Gullah Geechee communities. This small reddish-brown cowpea is closely tied to the region's rice and pea traditions, including Hoppin' John. It thrives in sandy coastal soil that many commercial legumes struggle with. Large-scale industrial bean production shifted almost entirely toward a small number of high-yield varieties bred for mechanized harvest, and regionally adapted peas like this one were largely dropped from commercial catalogs by the mid-1900s. Seed preservation groups working directly with Gullah Geechee farmers have been central to bringing it back into cultivation. 8. Green zebra tomato, bred for flavor, not freight. We talked about Cherokee Purple's pigment-rich flesh earlier, and here a similar idea shows up again in a completely different form. Green zebra is a striped green tomato developed in the 1980s by breeder Tom Wagner, specifically for flavor and appearance rather than uniformity or shelf life, the opposite priority of most commercial breeding programs of that era. Its tangy, bright flavor made it a favorite among chefs, even as commercial tomato breeding moved almost entirely toward firm, red, long-haul varieties. 9. Long pie pumpkin, New England's working pumpkin. This elongated, tan-colored pumpkin was a staple of colonial and early American New England kitchens, prized for its dense, less watery flesh, better suited to pie filling than the round jack-o'-lantern types that eventually took over the market for purely decorative reasons. As Halloween carving pumpkins became commercially dominant, cooking-oriented varieties like this one were gradually squeezed out of most seed catalogs. 10. Grandpa admires lettuce, named for the man who saved it. This buttery, heat-tolerant lettuce is named for Admire, an Ozark farmer whose family kept the seed alive for generations before it was formally cataloged by the Seed Savers Exchange in the 1980s. It's a direct example of exactly how most surviving heirlooms made it to today, not through institutions, but through individual families quietly replanting the same seed year after year, long before anyone called it a movement. 11. Country Gentleman corn, the corn with no rows. Introduced commercially in 1890, this white sweet corn has an unusual, irregular kernel pattern instead of the tidy, straight rows modern eaters expect, a trait that made it a poor fit once mechanical harvesters and uniform packaging became the industry standard in the mid-1900s. It's remembered by heirloom growers for an especially sweet, tender kernel, and it's a clear example of how a crop can be dropped from commercial production for reasons that have nothing to do with taste or nutrition. 12. Seminole pumpkin, bred for Florida's heat and humidity. While long pie was bred for New England winters, Seminole pumpkin was bred for the exact opposite, relentless Florida heat, humidity, and pest pressure. Cultivated by Seminole communities for centuries, this tan, ridge squash is remarkably disease-resistant and productive in growing conditions that defeat most commercial squash varieties. It's increasingly used by Florida permaculture and native plant gardeners, specifically because it thrives without the heavy fertilizer and pesticide inputs modern hybrid squash often needs. 13. Mortgage Lifter tomato, a Depression-era success story. Bred by MC Radiator Charlie Biles in West Virginia during the 1930s and 40s, this enormous pink beefsteak tomato was reportedly so popular that Biles sold enough seedlings at $1 apiece to pay off his house mortgage. hence the name. It's one of the few heirlooms with a clearly documented origin story rather than a lost or uncertain one, and it remains one of the most widely grown heirloom slicing tomatoes today, prized for its size and low acidity. 14. Amish paste tomato, bred for preserving, not snacking. Where mortgage lifter is about size and slicing, Amish paste is about density. Originating with Amish farming communities in Wisconsin, it's a meaty, low-moisture tomato developed specifically for canning and sauce making, a use case almost entirely engineered out of modern commercial tomatoes, which are bred instead for a fresh market appearance and shipping durability. It remains a favorite among home canners for exactly the trait that made commercial breeders move away from it. It doesn't produce much watery filler. 15. Black Krim tomato, Crimean heritage on American soil. Originating on the Crimean Peninsula and brought to the U.S. by seed collectors in the 1990s, Black Krim produces a deep purplish-black tomato with a distinctive smoky, slightly salty flavor attributed to its unusually high concentration of anthocyanins in the skin. Its dark pigmentation and irregular shape made it commercially unappealing under mid-20th century grading standards that favored uniform red color, which is a large part why varieties like it were excluded from mainstream seed catalogs for decades. 16. Bloody butcher corn, a dent corn with deep roots. This dark red, nearly maroon dent corn has documented roots in Virginia going back to before the Civil War. Traditionally used for cornmeal and animal feed, it was largely replacing commercial agriculture by high-yield yellow dent hybrids developed through 20th century breeding programs optimized for industrial livestock feed production. Its return has been driven mostly by small-scale grain millers and homesteaders interested in traditional cornmeal flavor and color. 17. Candy roaster squash, an Appalachian and Cherokee staple, grown for generations in the southern Appalachians, with roots tracing the Cherokee agricultural traditions. Candy roaster is a large, banana-shaped winter squash known for its unusually sweet, dense flesh. Regional squash varieties like this one were largely displaced as a small number of standardized butternut and acorn types came to dominate national grocery distribution in the post-war era, simply because they stored and shipped more predictably at scale. 18. Lutz Winter Keeper Beet, bred to survive the cellar. Developed for cold climate root cellaring. This beet was prized for staying firm, sweet, and edible for months in cold storage, a critical trait before refrigeration was standard in rural homes. As commercial produce distribution shifted toward crops that could be shipped fresh year-round instead of stored locally, long-keeping varieties like this one lost their commercial advantage, even though the underlying trait, natural storage life, is arguably more useful for a home gardener than for a supermarket supply chain. 19. Yellow pear tomato, documented since the 1800s, nearly 2 centuries old. Yellow pear is one of the oldest documented tomato varieties still in cultivation, with references dating back to at least the 1800s. Its small, teardrop-shaped fruit and mild flavor made it a garden favorite for generations, but its thin skin and low yield per plant made it commercially impractical once tomatoes became a mass-ship commodity. It survives today almost entirely through home gardeners and seed exchanges. 20. Purple-top white globe turnip, the everyday crop almost no one grows anymore. And here we are, the crop I saved for last, because it represents such a plain, unglamorous close to this list. Purple-top white globe is about as ordinary as a root vegetable gets, a turnip documented in American gardens since the 1880s. Once one of the most commonly grown fall and winter vegetables in the country. It was a staple precisely because it was reliable, stored well, and needed almost nothing from the gardener. As diets shifted toward a narrower set of commercially standardized vegetables in the mid-1900s, plain, unglamorous crops like this one simply stopped being planted. Not because anything was wrong with them, but because nobody was marketing them anymore. If you're seeing the pattern here, it's this: almost none of these crops disappeared because they were inferior. They disappeared because 20th century agriculture optimized hard for a small set of traits: uniform size, long shelf life, mechanized harvesting, and everything that didn't serve those goals got quietly dropped from the seed catalogs, regardless of flavor, nutrition, or regional resilience. That's not a conspiracy. It's just what happens when a food system scales to logistics instead of diversity. The encouraging part is that none of these crops are gone for good. They exist today because individual families, tribal seed-saving programs, and organizations like Seed Savers Exchange kept replanting them year after year, long before heirloom was a marketing word. If any of this interests you, the easiest way to help is genuinely simple. Buy from a farmer growing heritage varieties, visit a seed swap, or plant even one packet of heirloom seed in your own yard. Drop a comment and tell me which crop on this list surprised you the most. I guess most people have never heard of at least half of these. And if you want more real, well-documented agricultural history, subscribe, because we're building exactly that kind of channel.